Critical Role, founded in 2015, is the largest actual play of all time. Not just due to the fact that it totally changed the sphere of D&D actual plays and TTRPGs as a whole, but it's also so incredibly long. If you watched 12 hours of Critical Role every single day, it would take you 3 months to get caught up. Over that amount of time and with that many fans, it is impossible not to run into some controversies. It's impossible for the cast to not do some things that people are unhappy with. My first concern going into a video like this is the potential backlash. Of course, I'm talking about controversies. Things are gonna get controversial. However, specifically about Critical Role, it has a very die-hard base of both fans and haters. In a video like this, I potentially risk upsetting either of these groups, or more likely, upsetting both of them just because this video exists. Different online communities, like the Critical Role live chat, can be one of the most toxic places on the internet. Critical Role has an entire fan subreddit just to shitting on Critical Role. By the way, the people who hurl abuse at Critical Role on their live streams are just as much mega fans as the people who buy every single merch item. If you are showing up to a 4-hour live stream every week to comment in its comment section, it doesn't matter what you're saying. Whatever that thing is, you are a super fan of that thing. However, I should be clear, mega fans, both the supportive and the hateful, are a really small part of the community. It just happens that they are incredibly vocal, and they are the only ones you're gonna see. When you get to the size that Critical Role is at, there's literally nothing you can do to stop these little micro communities from making everyone else in the community look bad. But either way, these people make talking about Critical Role incredibly stressful. Every time I see a YouTuber that I follow talk about Critical Role, the comment section is an absolute mess. So before I get into the rest of this video, I want to be abundantly clear. In no way, at any point in this video, am I attacking you for liking Critical Role. At the same time, I am not attacking you for not liking Critical Role. Everybody has their different tastes. If you don't like the show because you don't like that Matt has long hair or something, that's your right to not like the show and not watch it. However, that doesn't give you the right to hurl abuse at anybody just because you aren't a fan and other people are. Tiberius Stormwind was a character played by Orion Akaba for the first 20 or so episodes of Critical Role. Then one day, he simply did not show up, and we haven't really heard anything officially from Critical Role since. If you want like a full in-depth how much we know, there's a Super Geek Mike, there's actually 2 Super Geek Mike videos about Tiberius Stormwind and that whole situation, and if you want to know more about that, you can go to that video. In general, Orion was known for metagaming and sometimes going a little too far with the inappropriate humor. The entire cast was known for making inappropriate humor. However, if you know what I'm talking about, you know that he took it one step too far to the point where it made everyone uncomfortable. However, that isn't the only reason that he left, and to our understanding that there's also a lot of stuff behind the scenes that led to him leaving. Which him leaving isn't actually what I want to talk about in this video. It's totally fine to realize that someone's personality doesn't work with the show that you're working on, or even between close friends. It's okay to realize that, hey, I'm not compatible with this person, I don't want to spend time with them. That's a totally valid thing to do. However, the way that Critical Role went about it, I don't necessarily know if it was the best way to do it. The cast and crew of Critical Role never talking about Orion, trying to push him under the rug, having a very quick scene to wrap up his story while being played by Matt. I believe they blow up the continent that he's from to like kill him off. And then in every single rehashing of the story, Tiberius is either not there or he's there for a really, really brief amount of time and leaves before the actual campaign story begins. So I think their attempt to rewrite history and push things under a rug and never give audiences an answer as to what was going on, well, I think it's kind of their fault on why fans got so speculative and got so nosy into this situation. There were people who were fans of Tiberius, and they wanted to know why their favorite cast member had left the show. And so they went looking for information, and they talked about it with other people. And there were people who didn't like him, and they wanted to view this as some sort of victory over the things that he did. So there was a lot of theories, a lot of assumptions, a lot of people just flat out lying about what happened. And if Critical Role had just given a satisfying answer, even if that answer wasn't the truth, I feel like that would have been better for all parties involved. Because, to be clear, even if Orion was a jerk, we're assuming he's a bad person, he doesn't deserve to have people constantly harassing him for the rest of his life, trying to get answers on why he left Critical Role. And the cast doesn't deserve it either, and that's probably why they thought it best not to talk about it. However, I really think that that attitude of just trying to keep those type of things under the rug and never mentioning it is why the Super Geek Mike videos got so many views, is because people wanted to know. And when finally someone said, hey, here's the answer, people flocked to it because they've been curious this whole time. Now, let's talk about the Matt Mercer effect. The Matt Mercer effect is the idea that when Critical Role got really popular, it brought a lot of new people to D&D. However, when they started playing, they started trying to play like Matt Mercer because they thought that was the one and only correct way of DMing. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? If they think Matt Mercer is a good dungeon master and they want to be a good dungeon master, then they should do their best to try to be Matt Mercer. The issue with trying to do this, however, is that every single person on the planet, besides one, is not Matt Mercer, and trying to beat him will often lead to having more problems, more complications, and less fun than if you just played to your own personal strengths. If you go on YouTube and you search up Matt Mercer effect, Reddit Matt Mercer, horror story Matt Mercer, you're going to find a lot of examples off of Reddit of people talking about their experiences with the Matt Mercer effect, and a whole bunch of other videos of people talking about what we should do about it. Personally, I don't see any issue with this aspect of the Matt Mercer effect. To me, if you are a dungeon master or you're getting into dungeon mastering and you want to get inspiration from an actual play you like, that's fine. Is there a pretty good chance that your first game's going to be bad because you don't really understand what made Matt Mercer good? Yeah, there's a pretty good chance of that. However, there's a pretty good chance of your game being bad whether or not you're trying to be Matt Mercer or not. To me, it's more important to have people showing up and trying to DM and joining the hobby than being particular about where people are getting their inspiration from. However, a moment ago I said that this is an aspect of the Matt Mercer effect, because there's another part to it as well, and the second half is much more toxic. It's when the players try to give you, the DM, advice about what type of DM you should be, and all of their advice essentially leaning you into trying to make you more like Matt Mercer. Or even worse, criticizing what you're doing, not because it's inherently bad, but because it's not something that Matt Mercer would do. There's even times where players expect their DMs to be just as good at sounds and voices as Matt Mercer is, which, remember, he started off as a voice actor. To me, this is pretty ridiculous. As a player, I have some preferences as to what I like in a DM if I'm going to play D&D. However, that doesn't mean that I'm ever trying to mold a DM into the one that I want them to be. No, I just have different preferences, and if I see a DM is trying to run a game that I know I wouldn't like, I just choose not to play in it. This is especially silly with Critical Role, because what makes Critical Role what it is not Matt Mercer. It's all the other cast members. If you want your game to be more like theirs, don't show up and explain to your DM what they should be doing. show up and go, okay, what do I like about what the players do on Critical Role, and try to copy that. There's a reason why no one complains about the Travis Willingham effect or the Marisha Ray effect. However, if you did show up to a game and you told them that you wanted to play like Marisha Ray, there are definitely certain parts of the community who would be very unhappy to hear that. Now, Critical Role having haters isn't anything new. If you go back and watch the first even couple episodes of Critical Role and watch the live feed, first of all, why are you doing that to yourself? And second of all, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. Now, everyone got hate in one form or another. However, there was one person who seemed to get more hate than anyone else. This being Marisha Ray playing the character of Keyleth. This literally got so bad that she was getting death threats over how she was playing the game. Which makes me want to be abundantly clear, there is no possible thing that she could have done during the game that would warrant death threats. There's no decision you can make in D&D. There's no way you can play so badly that that warrants someone wanting you dead. Death threats are always inexcusable, but in this situation, I just want to point out how absolutely absurd and inappropriate it is. But what made people dislike her so much? Is she really a bad player? I mean, she's obviously not as bad as people say she is because of what people are saying, but maybe she is the weakest link of Critical Role. So let me start with my personal experience when it comes to the character of Keyleth. I didn't watch Campaign 1, however, my first experience with the character was watching The Legends of Vox Machina. And with that show, I really didn't like her character. It seemed like a majority of the fights in the show are all the other people in the party being brutalized and getting super close to death as Keyleth refuses to fight, and then finally at the end she does one big magic thing that saves everybody, and then no one ever complains that she nearly got them all killed just because she happened to save them just before they literally all died. So going into this, I actually had a negative bias against Keyleth. I didn't like the character, so if I saw negative things about the character, I was more likely to agree with them. But the main criticisms I saw about Marisha were that she forgets what her spells are and what they do. She sometimes argues with Matt about a ruling he has, and sometimes she metagames. From the little I've watched from Critical Role, I can say every single one of them do this. And they still do this because they're doing it in Campaign 3. And in the little bit of research and questioning of Campaign 1 fans that I did, I found out that yes, they also all were doing all of those things anyways. It's okay to have a least favorite character or a least favorite player. Someone has to be. But there's nothing that I have seen that points to Marisha deserving such a significant amount of hate compared to other cast members when they all make the same types of mistakes. I mean, I guess Travis never forgot his spells in Campaign 1, but that's because he didn't have any. If I'm being honest, I have a feeling why Marisha in particular was hated more than anyone else on the Critical Role cast, particularly more hated than any of the men. I think a lot of people were just unhappy that the largest, fastest growing actual play had women in it. And Ashley wasn't around enough for people to criticize her, so they had two to choose from, and they chose Marisha. Which, by the way, I'm not saying that if you don't like Marisha Ray, that you hate women. However, I do think the fact that she is a woman is a big reason why she got so much negativity compared to anyone else in the cast. And if you're sending death threats a woman's way because you don't like the way that she plays D&D, that says something about you. So as you know, Critical Role isn't a group of friends playing D&D anymore. It's a whole company. And with that, there's a lot of crew that they need to hire and a lot of expenses that they have, especially because they sell a lot of merch and do different live events and have a freaking publishing company. So it's no surprise that they make a lot of money off the show. However, there was never really an understanding of exactly how much they were making because they're a private company and don't need to disclose that information. This was until a few years ago when Twitch got hacked. And when that happened, a whole bunch of Twitch streamers' revenue for the last 2 years got leaked. And when that came out, it was shown that over the past 2 years, off of Twitch money alone, Critical Role had made about $10 million. And like I just said, this was money that was just made off of Twitch. That doesn't include money that they're making off of YouTube. That doesn't include their merch money. That doesn't include their publishing company or any other stream of revenue that they have. So if you really think about it, you can only imagine how much money Critical Role actually makes. Now, in my opinion, if people want to support Critical Role, either by giving them a Twitch sub or gifting Twitch subs to other people, or sitting through the ads, buying their merch, I don't care. If you want to support a show that you love, you have every right to do what you want to with your money. However, that wasn't the consensus of the community. There were a lot of people who thought that because Critical Role was so big and made so much money, that it wasn't the morally correct thing to do to be giving your money to Critical Role. Now, the common criticism that I saw and actually continue to see is that you shouldn't give your money to Critical Role because they don't need it and other actual plays need it more. Now, I can see why that might be an argument as to why you personally don't give money to Critical Role. However, I don't see that as a good argument as to why other people shouldn't be giving money to Critical Role. Because if you like the benefits of a Twitch sub, either you like the benefits it gives you in the live stream or in the community, or you just like supporting something that you watch every single week, then I don't see why there's anything wrong with supporting that show financially. At the same time, if you're being offered a free show and they make millions of dollars, it's also okay to say, hey, I don't feel the need to support this show financially, they have enough money. I think it's a good intention to try to convince people to give money to people who need it more. However, to say it's morally wrong not to, I just have to entirely disagree on that. So as you might remember, last year there were a ton of controversies involving Dungeons & Dragons and Wizards of the Coast. There were a lot of people looking to leave Dungeons & Dragons and were looking for a new RPG to play. And during this, there's a whole bunch of online discussion, a lot of it revolving the idea that wouldn't it be super cool if Critical Role made their own RPG and made the next campaign of Critical Role in that game system. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? They've worked on source books and adventure books before. I mean, they're the hugest voice in the RPG space. They have a publishing company. It's almost like all the puzzle pieces fit right into place for this to be possible. And then Critical Role announces that they're making Daggerheart, a brand new tabletop role-playing game. And when they announced this, there were people who got very excited. In fact, you could say too excited. There were a lot of people talking about what they wanted the game to be, what they were looking for, the ideas that they were excited about, and then later on, when Daggerheart released some of its playtest materials, there were a lot of people who were upset about what was in it. People didn't like the fact that it seemed to be a more card-based system with a lot of physical pieces involved. People didn't like the fact that there was no initiative order. There's all these questions about why they were trying these weird and different things. Even I was annoyed by some of the decisions being made, but it was from that I realized what the issue was. It wasn't really with Daggerheart at all, but it was with what my expectations for what Daggerheart would be. When people were first asking Critical Role to make their own RPG, essentially what they wanted was Pathfinder with a Critical Role sticker on the top. They wanted it to be similar enough to D&D that it still feels like the game that they love. However, it not be D&D and not tied to Wizards of the Coast, so that way they don't have to deal with all the problems of WotC. But they didn't want to make that type of game. They wanted to make something unique with a different experience that not a lot of people would have tried before. They didn't want Pathfinder, they wanted something new. And so when they released something new, there were a lot of people who were disappointed by the fact that it wasn't the thing that they wanted. I think expectations might have been more reasonable if from the get-go they just outright said, we're not trying to be Dungeons & Dragons, we're trying to be something new. This isn't going to feel like D&D because we don't want it to feel like D&D. And I still feel like there probably would have been criticism if they said that. There would have been people who were disappointed because that's not the RPG that they want. However, at the same time I try to say that, I also feel that there's really no way that they weren't going to disappoint some people. When people wanted a Critical Role RPG, that wasn't the only thing that they wanted. There was so many people who had different things that they wanted for a Critical Role RPG. And there's only so many people that could have been satisfied, and there's going to be people who are upset that they didn't get the thing they wanted, and it just so happens that this is the group of people who ended up not getting the thing they want. Now it's time to get into one of the most common controversies about Critical Role. In fact, every time there's even a minor controversy, this is very likely to get brought up. Is Critical Role scripted? The reason why people assume Critical Role is scripted is just how perfect it can sometimes feel. A natural 20 coming in and saving the day. A dramatic moment that pulls at the heartstrings, that finishes off an episode. A character dying right at the end of an episode. All these things that make it feel like the show had a plan and a timing that they were going for. The idea is that maybe they aren't reading line by line, but it's possible that they sit down and talk about what they want to get done in the episode and what events they want to happen, so when the game starts, all the players know what's going to happen. We can't ever really know if they're not scripting things. We can't prove a negative, which makes this type of theory so easy to spread. However, based off of all the information that I've seen, and from the Critical Role that I've watched, and so much coming from Super Geek Mike's video about this topic, which again, if you want a deeper dive, check that video out. The thing that I've found is that Critical Role is most likely not scripted. I'm pretty sure that players and Matt individually talk about what they want for their character or directions they see the storyline going and what they want to achieve. But that's more of just a DM player thing of making sure that they have the same idea for how they want things to happen with the character. I don't really understand how people can think the show is scripted and then complain about the fact that people will argue back and forth for 30 minutes. Obviously, if they know what direction they're going in, they're not going to argue for that long about it. Which actually goes into the next thing I want to talk about. I don't think it would be fair for me to make a whole video about Critical Role and all of its controversies without talking about what I feel about it. Again, for context, I watched like 47 episodes of Critical Role, and I was hooked. I thought there were great intense moments, there were great funny moments. It was great to have on in the background while I was playing video games or doing work. It was kind of like my soap opera for a while, which is exactly the reason I stopped watching it. Critical Role's pacing is horrendous. Even if you're a die-hard fan, you have to admit that there are times where just nothing happens for way too long. Sometimes it's the party arguing for 30 minutes about the next thing they're going to do. Sometimes it's just a really boring storyline that you don't personally care for, and then you realize, oh god, there's like another 3 or 4 episodes of this that I have to sit through. That's actually exactly why I stopped watching Critical Role. There was this big, intense event that was going to happen in a couple episodes, and I was really excited for it. However, the party had stopped off at this other place that didn't really feel like it had any connection to the story, and it just went on, and I didn't care. And I got to the point where I'm like, I'm not even interested in that big event that's going to happen anymore, because I know it's like 15 hours of content away. Watching Dimension 20 is really night and day compared to Critical Role. The pacing is so good. Things are constantly happening. The show does not waste your time. And on top of that, you really get this sense and feel that you don't need to stress about catching up for anything, because they're constantly switching campaigns, and every new campaign is a different world. It's a completely different universe. You don't need to watch Dimension 20 from the beginning. You can just watch from where you want to watch. So after going through all these controversies, after sharing my personal opinions on the show, what can we take away from all this? Well, there was a pattern that I noticed in most of the controversies that I talked about. Most of them are just personal preference. A lot of it is being nitpicky. A lot of it you might not like, but someone else might really, really love. Like, I don't like the pacing of Critical Role. There's probably people who love the fact that it's just super long and there's all this content and not everything has to matter to the story at all times. Your preferences are a perfectly valid reason to like or not like a show. However, there are not valid reasons to say someone's a bad person for not liking your show or saying that they're an idiot for liking it. I do think there's some places where the cast of Critical Role could get better at D&D. However, if you don't like the way they play, watch something else. If you don't like the pacing, watch Dimension 20. If you don't like the fact that it kind of feels scripted to you, there's like a million different actual plays that are just regular people playing on Roll20 who happen to be recording the session. Those are definitely not scripted, and you don't have to worry about that with those. If you don't like how much Critical Role makes, trust me, there are so many actual plays that are actively losing money every time they upload. You can find one to support. To finish off this video with something positive, if you have an actual play that you love that isn't the Adventure Zone, Dimension 20, or Critical Role, put it in the comments. Help other people find it. Maybe you can make another new potential fan out of it and help build a new community rather than trashing on an existing one. And to end off this incredibly long recording session, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and you want to support my channel, the best thing you can do is to click that subscribe button to stay updated on future releases. Thank you again for watching, and this is the end of the video.